Hello gentlemen, it's Mr. Brown back at you again for another video lecture. And today we're going to be talking about history writing and point of view. So as we see on page 279, history writing is nonfiction that presents people and events from the past. Now it's different than what we know as historical fiction. Historical fiction would be like what we see in the film Titanic or Saving Private Ryan or 1917. The Titanic disaster was a real thing, but the characters in that film are fictional. In history writing, the characters are real people who lived real lives. And so the writer has to do a great deal of research to make sure that they are being true to that person's story. In the case of the Triangle Factory fire, many of these people don't have an opportunity to speak for themselves because they perished in that awful disaster. And so it's all the more important that the writer gets their story right. Let's look at the selection from the nonfiction essay, Flesh and Blood So Cheap, that really illustrates how this is a historical writing piece. Accused of ignoring their employee safety, Triangle owners Blanc and Harris were charged with manslaughter. During the 3-week trial, angry citizens packed the courtroom. Outside in the corridors, women screamed, "Murderers! Murderers! Make them suffer for killing our children." Lawyers argued that Blanc and Harris kept all of the Triangle doors locked during the workday, therefore causing many deaths. Notice the third-person limited perspective that's being used here. So we don't know the minds of these characters. And in fact, everything that you read could have been gathered through careful research of newspapers and accounts of people who were there at the time. We can compare that third-person limited perspective to this selection from Uprising. Jacob handled it all so gently, almost lovingly. Above his head, the tissue paper patterns dangled from wires, so when he stood up, it was like watching someone across a forest, half hidden by hanging moss and low branches. Once again, we're looking at a third-person perspective here. However, this time, instead of third-person limited, we're looking at what's called third-person omniscient. Omniscient means all-seeing. God is omniscient. We're able to see the feelings and know the thoughts of this character. It would be practically impossible for a history writer to use third-person omniscient, because even though they can interview people who were at the scene and do loads of research, they can't know the thoughts and feelings of everybody that was there at every single moment. With historical fiction, the writer is free to use things like third-person omniscient because they are creating the characters. The world is real, but the characters are of their own imagination. When you think of third-person perspective, you can think of third-person video games like Final Fantasy VII, The Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption, and even the original Mario Brothers. In these games, we are outside of the main character, watching them move around on the screen. In the same way, we are watching the characters from a he, she, they perspective. We can compare that to first-person games like Call of Duty, Minecraft, Halo, in which you are seeing the world through the eyes of your character. So you would be in the I, me, my perspective. So history writing is going to feature more third-person perspectives, whereas historical fiction is going to feature first-person and third-person omniscient. So let's open up to analyze the text on page 304, and number 1 asks us to summarize. At the end of this novel excerpt, where is each character going and why? Number 1. At the end of the excerpt, Yetta, Jane, and Bella are all trying to escape from the fire on the 9th floor. Bella makes it toward the Green Street stairs, but Jane is cut off by the fire and must find another way. After pointing her friends toward that exit, Yetta has held back for some reason not yet known. Number 2. Compare. How does the shifting point of view help you understand the similarities and differences among the 3 characters? Well, during each account, we find out something about each character's background and goals. This makes the characters come alive to the reader and seem more sympathetic. Yetta is Jewish, a union organizer who believes in fair treatment of workers. Jane was educated at a finishing school, works at a governess, and her friendship with Yetta and Bella is helping her to understand class differences.
Bella is an Italian immigrant and has struggled with prejudice. She has a boyfriend named Pietro. The girls all seem like real people, and although they come from different backgrounds, they have hopes and dreams for the future. Boyfriends, better jobs, fairer treatment, but now none of that matters. They all have one common goal: to escape.
Number 3. Cite evidence. How does the author use the chapter entitled Jane to show contrasts between the business owners and the workers? Jane brings her charges to the 10th floor with its big offices and fancy desks. Mr. Blanc's daughters have a governess and a mother who travels to Florida for the social season. Jane is overwhelmed by the contrast with the, quote, dim, dirty space on the 9th floor and the packed working conditions the girls must endure. We hear her thoughts such as, quote, no wonder Bella felt so overwhelmed, that shows she is not happy seeing the difficult working conditions. Number 4. Analyze. Reread lines 590 through 618. Then look back to lines 212 through 222 of the excerpt from Flesh and Blood So Cheap. Why might the author of Uprising have introduced the fancy silver buckle? Although the nonfiction account shows that the fire escape's collapse was part of the real-life event, the image of the fancy silver buckle is from the author's imagination. It shocks the reader, just as it shocks the character Bella. The author uses details like this to bring readers into the scene and into the minds of the characters. Number 5. Evaluate. Find a passage in which the author provides facts about the setting. How effectively does the author make this information seem part of the fictional work? Explain. On the 10th floor, Harriet points out the pressing department through a break in the wall into a vast open space where rows and rows of weary-looking workers stood over ironing boards. The author then uses dialogue between Harriet and Millicent to describe the irons and gas heating system. This is a natural way to work information into any story. And number 6, synthesize. How is dialogue in this historical novel different from the quotations in the nonfiction excerpt from The Story of the Triangle Factory Fire? The dialogue in historical fiction has two purposes: to move the narrative along, as in any fiction story, and to provide factual information. The dialogue in the excerpt from Uprising is like natural conversation. The quotations in the nonfiction work stand alone and provide supporting evidence for the author's main ideas.
That's it for today, gentlemen. I hope all of you are doing well. We will be continuing in this chapter, working towards our test, which will be on April 30th. Be well.